I was reviewing quarterly reports when the Instagram notification lit up my screen. My sister had just posted a photo: champagne flutes, string lights, a crowd of familiar faces filling my aunt's backyard. The caption read, "Finally celebrating the launch of Amber Rose Collective, surrounded by everyone who made this possible." I smiled at first, genuinely. My sister had been working on her lifestyle brand for nearly 2 years, and part of me, despite everything, was proud of her. I scrolled through the photos. My mom, beaming in a yellow dress. My dad, looking stiff but happy. My college roommate Priya, who I hadn't seen in months, laughing at something near the drink table. My coworker Dana, my old neighbor from Crescent Hill. I kept scrolling, kept looking. My name wasn't tagged. My face wasn't anywhere. That was the moment I understood I hadn't been invited to my own sister's launch party, a party filled with the people from my life. I set my phone down on my desk and stared at the wall for a long moment. The office hummed with the quiet sound of keyboards and air conditioning. Outside the window, the Denver skyline sat gray and indifferent against an October afternoon. I thought about calling my mom immediately, but something stopped me. Not politeness, not fear, just a cold, clean instinct that told me to wait, because whatever was happening here was bigger than a forgotten invitation. My sister and I had never been close, not the way people imagined sisters should be. Growing up, she was the one who lit up rooms without trying. Even at 8 years old, Amber had this quality: she could walk into a space and make everyone feel like they'd been waiting for her. I was 2 years older, quieter, better at math, worse at being noticed. My mom used to say, "Don't be jealous, Lily. Your sister just has that energy." I wasn't jealous. I was just tired of being invisible in my own home. By the time we were adults, the dynamic had calcified into something we didn't even talk about anymore. Amber floated from passion project to passion project: photography, then event planning, then a wellness blog, then a boutique candle line that never launched. My parents cheered every new venture. When she needed money for startup costs, my mom called me. When she needed a co-signer on a new apartment lease because her credit was too thin, my mom called me. I said yes, because that's what I did. I was the responsible one. The one with a real salary and a clean financial record, and the mistaken belief that helping your family meant something. The last time I'd bailed her out was 14 months ago. Amber had called crying, not unusual, saying she had a real opportunity this time, a skincare and lifestyle brand with a partner manufacturer already lined up, but she needed collateral to secure the initial production contract. "Just a signature," she said. "Just your name as a business reference," she said. "I'm going to pay you back as soon as the first order ships." I'd signed. I always signed. I told myself that's what family did when they believed in each other. My phone buzzed. A text from Priya. "Why weren't you here tonight? Your sister said you were traveling." I stared at the message. I hadn't been traveling. I'd been at my apartment 12 minutes from my aunt's house, eating leftovers and watching a documentary. My sister had told people I was traveling. A lie smooth enough to go unquestioned, specific enough to close the conversation. That night, I drove past my aunt's house on the way home. The party was still going. I could see the glow of string lights through the hedges, hear faint music from the street. I sat at the stop sign a few seconds longer than I needed to. Through a gap in the fence, I caught a glimpse of my mother standing near the patio table, laughing. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, not sadness, not even anger, but something sharper. The beginning of a question I should have asked years ago. My mom called 3 days later. Her voice had that particular warmth she used when she was managing me. "Sweetheart, you know Amber just wanted a small, intimate gathering. You know how you two have tension. I didn't want to make it awkward for her on such a big night." I let her talk. I kept my voice even. I asked one question. "Who invited Dana from my office?" Silence. "Dana," I said again. "My coworker. How does Amber know Dana well enough to invite her to an intimate gathering?" My mom said she must have run into her somewhere and it just came up. I said nothing. I thanked her for calling and I hung up. That week I started paying attention in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. I pulled out the documents I'd signed 14 months ago and read them carefully for the first time. I had been so tired when I signed, so worn down by Amber's crying and my mom's gentle pressure, that I'd barely skimmed them. Now I read every line. The signature page showed my name as a financial guarantor on a business credit line, not just a reference, which is what they'd told me. A guarantor, responsible for repayment if Amber defaulted. The credit line was for $42,000. I went to my credit report that night. What I found made the room tilt slightly. There was a hard inquiry I didn't recognize from 8 months ago. A business credit account I hadn't opened. And then, buried in the details, a balance $26,000 outstanding on a line of credit tied to a business called Amber Rose LLC. My name was listed as a co-applicant. I hadn't applied for anything. I hadn't opened anything. My signature was there, but the application date predated our conversation by 3 months. Someone had used my personal information, my social security number, my employment history, my salary details to apply for that credit line. And then they had handed me a different document to sign, a layer of legitimacy over something that had already been done without my knowledge. I sat at my kitchen table until after midnight. The city outside was quiet. I thought about all the times my mom had called me asking for small things. Can you email me your latest pay stub, Lily? Just for the apartment application for Amber. And can I have your employer information? Sweetheart. Just for the loan paperwork. And just one more signature here? It's just a formality. I had given her everything she asked for because I trusted her. Because she was my mother. Because I had been trained since childhood to believe that trust and family were the same thing. They're not. My friend Marcus worked at a law firm downtown. I'd helped him move twice and never asked for anything in return. I texted him the next morning. Need advice. Personal matter. Can you point me to someone in financial fraud? He called me within the hour. When I told him what I'd found, he was quiet for a moment, then said, Lily, that's identity fraud. I know it's family, but that's a serious crime. He gave me the name of a colleague who handled exactly this kind of case. Her name was Patricia Chen. She had a small office near Civic Center Park, organized in a way that made everything look intentional. When I sat down across from her and laid out what I'd found, she didn't flinch. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her and started writing. She said, Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. And don't leave out the parts where you thought you were imagining it. So I did. I told her about 14 years of being the family fixer. I told her about the apartment cosign, the business reference that wasn't, the credit line I hadn't applied for. I told her about the launch party I hadn't been invited to, the colleagues who had. I told her about my mom calling to explain it away, and about Priya's text, and about sitting outside my aunt's house at a stop sign feeling something change inside me. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she put down her pen and said, You're not the first person to sit in that chair and tell me their family mistook access for love. She said there were 3 issues. Identity fraud for the unauthorized credit application, financial exploitation for the guarantorship I signed under false pretense, and potentially elder financial abuse statutes if we could show the pattern was deliberate and coordinated. She asked if I had documentation. I handed her the folder I'd spent 3 days assembling every email where my mom had asked for personal information, every document I'd signed, every bank statement showing the credit line activity, the credit report with the unauthorized inquiry. She opened the folder, reviewed the first few pages, and said, This is a good start. That was a Tuesday. By Friday, I had learned something else. Priya, feeling guilty about the text she'd sent, had gone back through her own memory of the party. She called me and said, Lily, I need to tell you something. At the end of the night, when everyone was saying goodbye, Amber made this little speech. She said it was a toast. She said the brand was possible because of people who understood her vision. And then she made a comment. Priya hesitated. She said something like, Not everyone in my life sees what I'm building. Some people are just too practical to dream. And she looked at her phone when she said it. Like she was reading from something. Like it was prepared. I asked Priya if anyone had filmed it. She said she didn't know, but Amber had gone live on Instagram for part of the night. I went to my sister's profile. The live video was saved as a reel. I watched it twice. There was the toast. There was the comment. And in the comments section, which was still active because the reel had been reshared, Someone had written, "Who is she talking about?" And someone else had replied, "I heard it's her sister who's been supporting her for years." And then a third person, someone I didn't recognize, had written, "That's wild because I heard she used her sister's credit to fund the whole thing." The reel had 47,000 views. My sister's account had 11,000 followers. The math didn't add up until I realized the video had been reshared by 3 larger accounts in the personal finance and family drama space. Comments were pouring in. Some defended Amber. Many didn't. Someone had screenshotted the comment about the credit and posted it separately. The post had been shared over 2,000 times. My phone started buzzing. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My mom, 3 times in an hour. I let them all go to voicemail. My dad called that evening. He sounded older than the last time we'd spoken. His voice quieter, like something in him had been slowly leaking out. He said, "Lily, your mother's upset. The comments online are getting out of hand. Can you please just post something to calm people down?" I said, "I don't have anything to post, Dad." He said, "We know things got complicated. We just need this to go away before it gets worse." I said, "It's already worse than you know." He was quiet. Then he said, "What does that mean?" I told him about Patricia Chen, about the credit line, about my name on an application I never filed. His silence was a different kind this time, not strategic, just heavy. He said, "Lily, we didn't know they'd done it that way." I said, "Who is we, Dad?" He didn't answer. I wasn't ready to feel sorry for him. Maybe later. Not then. Patricia moved quickly once the online attention made the situation more visible. She filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and simultaneously initiated a civil claim for financial exploitation and fraud. When my mom and sister were served, my mom called 14 times in 2 hours. I answered on the 15th call because I was tired of the noise. She cried. She always cried. She said we were going to destroy the family over money. I said, "You used my identity without my consent. That's not something I made up, and it's not something that goes away because it's uncomfortable." She said, "Amber needed help. She was struggling. We just needed to bridge a gap, and we knew you'd say no if we asked you the right way." She hurt herself. She went quiet. I said, "I know. That's exactly the problem." She said, "What do you want from us, Lily?" I said, "I want my name off a credit line I didn't open. I want the balance cleared, and I want an honest accounting of everything you've put under my name without telling me." She said that was impossible. I said, "Then we'll let the court decide what's possible." The hardest part was the family meeting. My aunt offered her house again, different circumstances this time. No string lights, no champagne, just the kitchen table, my aunt's coffee, and silence that smelled like old argument. My mom sat with her hands folded like she was in church. Amber wore sunglasses inside, which would have been funny in any other context. My dad sat to the side, not quite aligned with either table, the way he'd spent most of his life too uncomfortable to stand anywhere clearly. I didn't yell. I'd made that decision before I walked in. Yelling would give them something to respond to instead of something to sit with. I put the documents on the table and I walked through them the way Patricia had walked me through them calmly, in order, letting the numbers speak. The unauthorized credit application, the guarantorship I'd signed based on false information, the $42,000 credit line bearing my name that had been drawn down to its limit. The impact to my credit score. The loan application I'd been denied 6 months ago for a condo I'd been saving for denied because of a debt-to-income ratio I hadn't understood was there. Amber started to say she hadn't known about the credit score impact. I stopped her. I said, "You knew your name was on that application alongside mine. You signed the same documents. Either you read them or you didn't, but you signed them." She looked down. She said she thought it would be resolved before it mattered. I said, "It mattered to me the day the application was filed without my knowledge. It mattered when I was denied that loan." She had nothing to add to that. My mom tried a different angle. She said the brand was doing well now, that Amber was going to pay it back, that this was temporary, and if I could just trust the process, that word, process, like my financial identity being used without my consent was a project with a timeline. I interrupted her. I said, "Mom, I have a recording of a phone call from last March." I put my phone on the table and pressed play. It was a call between my mom and my aunt who I'd asked to keep a secret for the previous 3 weeks, who had agreed with a heaviness that told me she'd known something was wrong for a long time. In the recording, my mom's voice was clear and matter-of-fact. She said, "Lily won't ask too many questions as long as we keep it simple." She never does. My aunt said, "Are you sure this is the right way to handle it?" And my mom said, "It's the only way. If she knew the whole thing up front, she'd never agree, and Amber needs this." The kitchen was silent when I stopped the playback. My mom's face had gone the particular pale of someone who has just realized that the story they've been telling themselves out loud. Amber took off her sunglasses. My dad stared at the table. My aunt, standing near the counter, said softly, "Margaret, I'm sorry. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know." I looked at my mom and I said, "I've been the practical one my whole life. I've been the one who didn't need things, who could handle it, who wouldn't cause a scene. And that has cost me more than money. It's cost me years of believing that being useful was the same as being loved." She started crying real tears this time, not the managed kind. I didn't move toward her. I said, "The case will proceed. Patricia will be in touch with your attorneys. But I want you to understand something before that happens. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I'm done being the part of this family that absorbs damage so everyone else stays comfortable." My dad stood up slowly and walked to the window. He said, without turning around, "I should have stopped this. I didn't say anything." He said, "I knew things had been signed in your name, and I told myself it was just paperwork, that it would all get resolved. I told myself you were capable enough to weather whatever happened." He turned around and his eyes were red. He said, "I confused your competence with your consent." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Yes, you did. That's a good way to put it." The case settled out of court 4 months later. The terms required the credit line to be paid off in full from family assets, my name removed from all associated accounts, my credit report corrected with accompanying documentation, and a cash settlement to cover financial losses, including the condo I'd been denied. The amount wasn't transformative, but it was real. It was mine. Patricia shook my hand when we signed the final documents and said, "You handled this with more grace than most people manage." I said, "I had a good reason to stay calm." She asked what that was. I said, "I've been cleaning up chaos my whole life. I finally know what it looks like when it's not mine to clean." The Instagram reel had long since faded from the algorithm by the time any of this was resolved. Amber's brand survived, smaller and quieter than she'd planned. She didn't post much for several months. When she did, the tone had changed. Less aspiration, more honesty. Once, she posted a photo of herself at a coffee shop with the caption, "Rebuilding takes longer when you do it right." I didn't comment. I appreciated the quiet acknowledgement. My mom and I didn't speak for almost 5 months after the settlement. When she finally called, it was a Sunday morning in early spring. She didn't apologize right away. She said, "I've been thinking about the recording, about what I said." I told her I had too. She said, "I told myself I was protecting Amber, that I was keeping the family together." I said, "I know you believed that." She said, "I didn't think about what I was doing to you." I said, "I know that too. That might be the most honest thing we've said to each other in years." She laughed a little, a small surprised sound. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Lily, genuinely, for all of it." I said, "I believe you. I'm not ready to pretend nothing happened, but I believe you." That was enough, for now. Not resolution in the way movies describe it, where everything snaps back into warmth and everyone understands each other perfectly. More like the first inch of space after something long and tight, a beginning. The condo I eventually bought was in a building on the east side of the city with big windows that caught the afternoon light. The first night I slept there, I didn't set an alarm. I woke up on my own at 7 and lay there, listening to the unfamiliar quiet of a space that was entirely, accountably, mine. Nothing signed away, nothing borrowed against, nothing that would come due in the middle of the night months from now in the form of a credit inquiry I hadn't authorized. I started volunteering twice a month at a local financial literacy program, specifically a workshop for people navigating financial abuse within families. It surprised me how many people sat in that circle looking exactly the way I must have looked before I understood what was happening to me. Half apologetic, half bewildered, like they were still trying to figure out whether what had happened to them was serious enough to take seriously. I told them the same thing every time. You don't have to prove it was malicious to know it was wrong. The harm is real regardless of the intention. That took me a long time to understand. It doesn't have to take you as long. Amber came to see me once, unannounced, on a Saturday afternoon in November. She stood on my doorstep holding a paper bag from a bakery near her apartment, looking like someone who had rehearsed what she wanted to say and then forgotten it all on the drive over. I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table and she put the bag between us and didn't open it. She said, "I've been trying to figure out how to say what I need to say for months." I said, "Just say it, Amber," she said. "I knew Mom used your information before I signed those documents. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew you hadn't applied for it yourself. And I signed anyway. Because I wanted the brand to work and because Mom told me it would get sorted and because she stopped." She said, "Because I'd spent so long watching you take care of things that I'd convinced myself you could handle this too. Even without knowing about it." She looked up. She said, "That's not who I want to be." I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about being 10 years old and watching our mother rush to comfort her after every stumble while I stood holding a mop. I thought about all the times I'd told myself the gap between us was just personality, just circumstance, just the random distribution of family attention that no one could help. I thought about how long I'd carried the explanation that let everyone off the hook, except me. I said, "I appreciate you saying that. And I mean it." She nodded. I said, "I'm not ready to go back to what we were, but I don't need us to be enemies either. I just need you to understand that the version of me you relied on, the one who absorbs things quietly and keeps going, she's not available anymore. Not because I'm angry, but because she was never healthy to begin with," Amber said. "I think I'm starting to understand that." I said, "Good. That's actually more than I expected." She smiled a little, small and uncertain. I smiled back, the same way. The bag from the bakery had 2 almond croissants. We ate them at my kitchen table with coffee and talked about small things, her new apartment, my job, a show we'd both been watching. Not like we used to. Not like sisters who'd grown up easy with each other. More like 2 people who had shared something complicated and were slowly, carefully, figuring out what came next. Outside, the November light was flat and thin the way Denver gets in late fall. The sky a pale sheet of white-gray that made everything look very still. I thought about who I'd been 12 months ago, the woman who got a notification on her phone and looked through every face in a crowd trying to find herself, who drove past a lit backyard at a stop sign and sat there longer than she needed to, not because she wanted to go in, but because she was still trying to understand what it meant to be left out. I understood it now. And more than that, I understood what it had taken to stop being left out of my own life while still showing up for everyone else's. The financial counselor I worked with at the nonprofit said something once that I've thought about often since. She said, "The hardest part of recovering from family financial abuse isn't the money. It's unlearning the belief that your needs are a burden and other people's needs are emergencies." I wrote that down. I've shared it in every workshop since. My credit score recovered faster than I expected. The condo went up in value. I got a promotion in the spring. None of those things are the point. The point is that I made each of those things happen for myself, with no one's signature on the back of my name, no hidden co-applicant, no slow, invisible drain on something I'd worked years to build. The party went on without me. I used to think that was the end of the sentence. Now I understand it was the beginning of a different one. If you've ever been the person in your family who gives and gives while other people celebrate, if you've ever looked through a crowd trying to find yourself and come up empty, I want you to know something I had to learn the hard way. Being dependable is not the same as being disposable. Being capable is not the same as consenting to be used. And the day you stop shrinking yourself to keep someone else comfortable is not the day you lose your family. It's the day you find yourself. Tell me in the comments if you've ever been there. And if this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share it because somewhere out there, Someone is sitting at a stop sign outside a lit backyard, trying to figure out what they deserve. Maybe this helps them figure it out a little sooner than I did.